Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our talks with Walt. We now turn to the next of our study of poems from Inscriptions, the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass, poem number 16. This one is Savantism. Now, again, as we've sometimes seen, Whitman loves to use these somewhat obscure, kind of arcane words, and he'll play this game with the word Savantism. You know, it's often forgotten and I think underappreciated that Whitman lived in an incredible moment in American history where there was a certain kind of tension between two awakenings that were happening at the same time. One was a religious awakening, and the other, of course, a political awakening. And this tension between the two, Whitman, more than any other writer, is somehow able to capture, although obviously Melville does a magnificent job of it as well in a text like Moby Dick. Now, what is this term Savantism? Well, our Nortons will tell us that probably best to simply see it as the wisdom, quote, the wisdom which perceives, understands, insight here, perceives the relationship and indebtedness of all appearance to its spiritual source. We'll, of course, use the term from our study of Plato, perspicacity, right? Now, our assumption is that you've already been working with a poem like Eidolons earlier in Inscriptions, and a study like that is going to help our work here. There are some assumptions. Let's remind ourselves of them. First of all, I'm hoping, I already mentioned Eidolons, that you've been following our previous lectures, and at learnstrong.net down the left-hand side there you can find it. Talks with Walt, as I'm calling these conversations with Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass as we're working through the deathbed edition poem by poem. Why? Because we are the stories that we tell and retell. We're also the stories we decide to accept and reject. Our learning theory is as well assumed here. That is to say, we're constantly trying to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. The new is the new, the NEW is the KNEW. And our annotative approach then tries to answer three guiding questions. What does the text say? Summarizing. What does the text mean? At 2A, themes, messages at 2B. The rhetorical techniques that Whitman employs, especially poetically. And finally, at level 3, how can I relate to this information in some meaningful way? I've already mentioned at 3A, I've already mentioned Eidolons as a text. I'm hoping you have some familiarity with it. It will help you to read Savantism. And then finally, can I relate to this information myself? My hope is that you have your own deathbed edition and you're marking it up all over the place. That is to say, you're trying to own these titles one at a time, asking, what can I gain from each one of these poems? I think, if done well and correctly, Whitman has a lot to say to us. Now, of course, we've got our big five as we're always referencing them. What does this text say about epistemology and what we can know? We're going to see quite a bit of that here. Ontology and who we are, psychology and sociology, the dynamics between the individual and the collective mind, and then finally the question of theodicy, namely, why do bad things have to happen and how can I deal with those? How can I learn from those in some important way? Finally, we assume that we're looking at Whitman from at least 5 different perspectives. There's at least 5 Whitmans and way more than that in our study, we'll see. But we obviously will see Whitman as person. I just commented on the fact that he's living in a time of dynamic American thought happening both religiously and politically. Whitman as poet, Whitman as pedagogue or instructor or teacher, and finally Whitman as politician, his love of democracy, and Whitman as philosopher, from the pre-Socratics and Socrates all the way up and including obviously Emerson, the great American thinker. Now let's get a little bit of background information out of the way quickly, as we always do with these kinds of studies. This poem, 1860 is our date here, transferred to passage to India in 1871, and then to the passage to India annexes of Leaves of Grass in 1872, and the 1876 two rivulets, and then finally to the Inscriptions passage of 1881. Whitman, as we have said, was constantly restructuring his poems and where he put them and the order that he put them in. Let's turn now to the poem Savantism, and let's just enjoy how it is that he will play the game of being Whitman the Big Daddy. Now, there is a good argument that Whitman, from his notebooks, seemed to think that he might be able to produce a new religion, an American religion. Now, whether that was something he was able to pull off or not, we can obviously debate. But by the end of this poem, we're going to see a very interesting word picture of not God the Father, but Whitman the Father, and the American children that will be his progeny. Let's play the game. By the way, notice the word thither is going to be reproduced 4 times, anaphoria, at the beginning of each of the major lines, right? Of course, this adverb, which seems to suggest something about movement toward some kind of place, will play that game. Savantism. Thither as I look, I see each result and glory retracing itself and nestling close, always obligated. Thither hours, months, years. Thither trades, compacts, establishments, even the most minute. Thither everyday life, speech, utensils, politics, persons, estates. Thither we also, I with my leaves and songs, trustful, admirant, as a father to his father, going takes his children along with him. Now, again, this word picture at the end, seeing the American people as his children is one way to read this. Obviously, the poems of Leaves of Grass is another antecedent possible to this idea, the children that he's speaking of. We'll get to it in a moment. Notice again, at least 5 times the word thither gets used. In other words, movement towards, progression. Put that in your notes. It's always, again, about his understanding of Darwin, his understanding of evolution, the evolutionary view that everything is moving in certain kind of trajectories. We begin, of course, with perspicacity. It's as we said with our study of eidolons, and go back and look at that lecture again, so much of Whitman is about Plato and Plato's Republic, and of course the cave allegory, the whole notion of sitting in a cave, looking at shadows on a wall, thinking those shadows are in fact real. Why? Because of a certain kind of epistemological ignorance, right? There's things that you just don't know. And how do you learn things? One of those ways is, of course, to look. So here we go. Thither as I look, he says, again, this is all about perspicacity, sight, insight, right? I see each result and glory retracing itself. The new is the new. The NEW is the KNEW. And nestling close. Again, we're to that language of nature, that language of Thoreau's Walden. Nestling close, always obligated. In other words, there are circles and wheels within circles and wheels, to make a biblical reference, right? That idea that there's embeddedness, just like we talked about in our lectures on Thoreau's Walden. There's an embeddedness to nature, that web of life, as it's sometimes referred to in the biologies, right? That synchronicity, that ability for it all to kind of fit together. He says, you know, it's pretty amazing when you look at the things that you can see. Thither, the second thither, hours, months, years. Notice the cycles of time, right? Thither, the third of our thithers, trades, compacts, establishments, are threes. Notice them here. Even the most minute. That is to say, put it in your notes, it's an important way to read Whitman. Nothing is insignificant. He learned this from his study of Tennyson's Ulysses. I am part of all that I have yet, all experiences an arch where through gleams that untraveled wordless margin fades forever and forever when I move. To follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bounds of human thought, he will say a few lines later. Very influential in the thinking for Whitman of the way you must see your hours, your months, your years, the trades, the compacts, the agreements, the establishments. Thither, then on to the next thither, the third thither at the beginning of the line. Everyday life. And this everyday is huge. This is one of the reasons why we have these elided verbs all the way through. Vernacular, capturing the everyday. Whitman wants to be a poet of the children, of the people, of the American people, and of course, of the individuals of the world. Everyday life. Notice you have 6 of these now listed. Life, speech, utensils. He's very interested in machinery, right? Politics, persons, estates. That is to say, all the things that make us who we are somehow born of earlier things. That cell phone sitting in front of you, as the great Jordan Peterson has pointed out, isn't really a cell phone. It's nothing more than a tool. As long as it works, that's all that it is. It only becomes a cell phone the moment it stops working. And if that's true, then we obviously ask the question, well, what's wrong with my cell phone? A car isn't a car, it's a tool until it stops working. And then all of a sudden it becomes a car. It's this kind of foreign object. We don't know exactly how it works. If that's true of phones and cars, it's also true of civilization. It's not civilization. It's just simply a tool that we use until it stops working. It is fragile. and it must be respected as such. So all of these different elements that make civilization, the poet reminding us here, it's all fragile, it's all powerful, it's all important. And then finally, the last thither, and then the inclusion of you, the reader. Notice with poet Whitman, the speaker, thither we also. I, with my leaves, of course here leaves of grass, and songs. He says of himself, trustful. This is a huge key concept for leaves of grass. Whitman wants you to believe that he is authentic, that you can trust him in some way. Now, whether you can or not is, of course, your decision to make. Admirant is a key word as well. Whitman's respect, his ability to admire, and he wishes to be at least trusted or admired. And then he uses a most fascinating simile. As a father to his father going takes his children along with him. Now, there are so many ways that we will play this one out in Leaves of Grass. First of all, Whitman as person, he didn't have the best of daddies. Let's just say that out loud, okay? His father struggled with alcohol and drink. He struggled with keeping jobs. He was abusive at times. We're not going to duck that one. So his use of the word father here, in fact, twice makes us pause, right? This idea of the importance of the father is obviously a religious idea as well. So notice here, a father to his father going. Now we cannot help but think of our comments on Wordsworth's "My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky." At the end of that poem, the child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. That idea that somehow you are a product of those who brought you into this world, but you as well are symbiotically responsible for so much of who they are. Or as one of my seniors once said, I get it, parents, they raise us, and then we turn around and we raise them. It's a compelling insight. Notice here, as a father to his father, going, Savantism, embedded, right? You are, isn't that fascinating? You don't have a photograph of your great-great-great-great-grandma. But the people who study this stuff say that your eyes looked a whole lot like hers. Isn't that interesting? You carry within you all of the previous stories. All of the previous DNA is somehow constructing who you are. And that for him is quite a remarkable thing. As a father to his father going, takes his children along with him. Now obviously Whitman is playing games, calling his poems in Leaves of Grass. His children is an easy reading here. Talking to the American people and saying, I will be the father that will in fact lead my children. This obviously will carry with it as well that Moses-like, Exodus-like biblical referencing as well. All of that is assumed in this poem, Savantism. Let's finish really quickly. At 2A for themes, messages, sight is all about this poem. And to some degree, Whitman playing with the ideas of Aristotle in poetics, as we've given lectures on it, or even that reference that Shakespeare's Hamlet will have when he talks about what great art is. It's like a mirror, and you look into the mirror and you see yourself somehow reflected back. We're playing a similar kind of game here. When we see life correctly, Whitman will argue, it's all amazing. It's all wonderful, in spite of the pain and the suffering and the evil. That's his theodicy. At 2B, well, notice the anaphoria. You actually have 5 thithers, although 4 of them to begin the lines. The symbolism of Whitman as a father is a fascinating symbol, and we're going to come back to it. We're going to see it a number of times. And by the end of his life, Whitman, who had, he manicured his image through photographs and the like, he had this incredible look, right? It was some have called it the Santa Claus look of the long white beard. Do some Google images of, especially later in his life, the way that he wanted to look elderly, he wanted to look fatherly, I guess would be a right adjective use of that, right? At 3A, well, we've mentioned Plato's Republic in Book 7 and the Cave Allegory. I think that was incredibly significant allegory for Whitman, and I think we'll come back to it over and over again as we relate to issues of epistemology and ontology. Who are you? Well, you're an individual who is trying to figure out what's real versus what is not real, and obviously you're looking for somebody you can trust. Whitman says, I'm that person. We think about our Plotinus, especially as it relates to our Emerson, that relates to our Thoreau, and then obviously Whitman. Eidolons I already mentioned as a poem that's playing a very similar game of trying to get down to the root of everything. What is at the heart of it all? What is at the basis of this That is to say, this Savantism or Eidolons. We think about Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. Go back and look at that lecture that I've given at learnstrong.net. Do you remember that set of lines? He says it. Those little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love, that mood, that gently leads us on until finally, what's he saying? We see into the life of things. What an interesting idea. We see into the life of things. Go back and take a look at Wordsworth's views there. Finally, at 3b. Well, how is your Savantism, your insight, right, improved already, maybe we would ask, through the study of a few of these poems of Leaves of Grass? I mean, think about this. We haven't even gotten to Song of Myself yet, the heart of Leaves of Grass, many will argue, or Song of the Open Road. And yet already maybe you're being challenged to find some perspicacity, to find some insight, to find some ways to see the world differently from the way you saw the world before. And that is, of course, the question, how well do you see into the life of things, to quote from Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, and how well can you do it better? And how are talks with Walt Whitman helping that to happen? I hope that that's happening as we work through each one of these poems together. Thank you.